Hello, welcome to this presentation about the Seeds of the Isles project. My name's Alex Wright and I'm going to tell you about a project we've been doing on the Orkney North Isles. Now, to make it a little bit more interactive, we're going to also include a slight quiz element. So, to begin with, can you spot the frog orchid in this picture? I'll just give you a couple of moments to look at it and I'll point it out. There you go, so it's here. See this little plant here, it's only about an inch high and this was found on North Ronaldsay. I work for the North Isles Landscape Partnership Scheme, which was specially created to support life in Orkney's North Isles while conserving and raising awareness of their distinct identities, heritage and culture. I work as a part-time project officer and there are various elements to my job. For example, I promote traditional Orcadian skills. These include hand knitting, machine knitting, straw work. A couple of examples of those are Simmons and Sukens, and those are ropes made from oat straw. Another lovely thing we do is teaching people how to make cubbies, which are baskets made from the oat straw. You'll see that technique used in the Orkney chair as well, so it's a very useful thing to learn. We also teach dry stone walling courses. I've been involved in the core path access improvements, which is making the footpaths more accessible. And this particular project I'm talking to you about today is part of the wildlife recording aspect of the job. And this particular project is called Seeds of the Isles. The North Isles Landscape Partnership covers the North Orkney Islands. I'll just give you a moment or two to look at our islands and just have a think which islands might actually be included, because it's not always obvious which ones they are. I'll just give you a moment to think about that. And here we go. So it includes these 10 habited islands. And here's the little quiz. What's this little plant here down the bottom? It's a curved sedge. So this little plant is found in the North Isles, and this particular picture was taken on North Ronaldsay, where it's only a tiny little plant and it grows along the on the shore side. The aims of the Seeds of the Isle project are to celebrate the beautiful wildflowers we find on the North Isles and to encourage people to grow seeds collected from local wildflowers and to then use the resultant plants in habitat creation and restoration areas. I'll give you a moment or two to think about what plants we can see here on the picture. This picture was taken on North Ronaldsay. They're thrift. When I started this project, I needed help, so I went to see a couple of local experts. The first one was John Crossley, who is the Orkney plant recorder. A plant recorder takes information about sightings of different species of plants, and these get sent back to national databases, and they're useful for things like planning applications or for scientific research, for example, monitoring climate change. The other person who was an enormous help was Eileen Summers. She used to work as an environmental officer at Orkney Islands Council. She's made some amazing wildflower places and she really knows her Orkney wildflowers. If you're interested in reading about how to create a wildflower meadow, if you look on the internet for the Orkney International Science Festival's magazine called Frontiers, you can see an article she's written. You might enjoy going to look at some of Eileen's bases. Here's one by the Balfour Hospital. Just to sort of orient yourself a bit, there's the roundabout and there's Foreland Road and that's the funeral directors there. So her space runs all along this side of the road, all the way along here. And I think it's a sustainable urban drainage system, because there's ponds along here that must be for collecting water from the roads. And this is a very, very rich site, and I certainly collect a lot of seeds from here for the wildflower project. Another site is at the Picaquoy Centre, so just to sort of show you where that is, that's the main road that goes past Tesco's. That's the campground there, and that's the car park for the Picaquoy, and it's this bit here that's got a pond there. So again, I got some great seeds from there, and it really sort of shows you what can be done with wildflower seeds and how it can really enhance a place. I'll tell you now how we set up the different courses. I went out to all these different islands, and I've still got some more to go to, and we used various sort of different spaces within the community depending upon what was available. So on some of the islands we used community centres, on Pape we used the community gardens polytunnel, and on West Ray we even had a lovely sitting room at a B&B. And we've attracted between 2 and 15 participants. I just put an advert out on the local social media, and that's how we get people. We keep it very, very casual, and it usually just involves sitting around a table. Now then, what's this plant here? I'll give you a moment or two to think about this one. This gorgeous plant is called spring squill. Again, a North Ronaldsay picture, and this plant, oh gosh, it's only about a couple of centimetres above the ground, and it's a very, very vivid blue, maybe a better blue than shown in this picture. I start the session off with a quiz in either pairs or three people, and this works as a bit of an icebreaker. And it's also so that I can tell what level everyone's at. And it's a nice thing to do because it encourages chatting. And I'll also ask if people have seen the plants on their islands, or if they happen to know of a local name for the plant. So just to make this video a bit more fun, you're going to go doing that with 3 different plants. We'll start with this one. Do you know what it is? It's bird's foot trefoil. This is a great plant for pollinators. It's a rich source of nectar and pollen. And how about this beautiful plant? This is ragged robin. It grows in marshland and wet soils. Interestingly enough, this plant is normally a delicate pink colour. However, on North Ronaldsay, we have quite a lot of it growing in a white form. And how about this last plant? This is yellow rattle. This is an interesting plant. What it does is its roots parasitize nearby plants, usually grasses. And what this does is this weakens the grasses, which then gives other plants a chance to grow on a bit better. It's called yellow rattle because when the seed head dries, it makes a rattling sound when you shake the plant. Once we've done the quiz, everyone tends to be quite relaxed, and then I have another handout that I give them. It's a 3-page handout, and it begins with the definition of a wildflower, which is a plant that has grown and has evolved naturally without the help of humans, and they are adapted to local conditions and form part of the ecosystem by providing food and shelter for wildlife, especially insects. And we begin by thinking about this question. We imagine that we have a native wildflower meadow on our Northern Isle, and we're thinking about whether these particular plants will be suitable to go in our wildflower meadow. So we're going to have a go doing that on the next slide. Here we go, here's the quiz. Again, maybe made a bit easier if you happen to live on a North Isle or live in Orkney and you know that these plants occur there. So we begin with the first one, which is kidney vetch. Do you think this plant is found in Orkney as a wildflower? And so would it be suitable for your wildflower garden or wildflower nature reserve? Yes, it would. So that was a good one to start with. And you can actually see a little moscada bee, I think, feeding on it. The next one is the tea rose, a cultivar called Royal William. Do you think that would do for our wildflower nature area? The answer, of course, is no. Now, the two reasons for that are this is a cultivar. It means it's been made by humans, so that doesn't fit our criteria of what a wildflower is. And the other thing is that there's something wrong with its structure for insects and pollinators. It's been bred to have a double set of petals in it. So those petals have taken the place of where you might have found pollen and nectar before. So that's not suitable that's not a suitable food source. Ooh, the next one is Himalayan balsam. Ooh, we really don't want to introduce that into our Orcadian wildflower area. This is, we'll talk about this plant more on a further slide, and I'll tell you why that's not suitable. Okay, the next one is a long-headed poppy, and this one is suitable. This is our native poppy. It's maybe a more salmony colour than the poppies you might see down south. But what about this next poppy, the Beauty of Livermore? Actually, it's not called that. It's called the Beauty of Livermere, and it's a cultivar. So we're going to say, no, that's no good, because it's a human-created plant. And what about the next one, a sunflower? Now this one is a no, because sunflowers actually aren't native to the UK or to Orkney. They come from America, so they wouldn't fit our native criteria. Now the next one, this one is one you have to think about. This one, a south thistle, is native to Orkney, but it can be one of those things that people might hate. You can get quite strong reactions when you talk about south thistle because it's seen as being quite an aggressive weed. It is actually a brilliant plant for pollinators. So have a think about, if you have it in your area, maybe put it somewhere that's not wildly obvious to people, or maybe just accept it's there because it's beautiful. The next plant is, yes, a devil's bit scabious. This is a beautiful native plant. And next one, a stinging nettle. Again, same sort of thing as the south thistle. It's very, very good for insects and caterpillars, but it's not one that people love. So say if you're making a wildflower area in front of a heritage centre, you might think, well, maybe I'm not going to put it there. But if there was some area around the back which had a lot of rich soil in it, that would be a great place for stinging nettles. Now, cornflowers are interesting. They're not actually native to Orkney, but we are saying we can have them in our wildflower garden. This was upon consultation with John Crossley. Cornflowers will only, they won't actually reproduce here, so they're an annual plant. They won't set seed, and they're quite a good one to have for the first year when you're trying to create a bit of a visual impact and to show that something's happening while you're waiting for the other plants, the perennials, to come along. The next one is an oxeye daisy, and yes, of course, we'll have those. Now the last one is knapweed, but grown with seed from Germany. We're going to say no to that, and the reason is it's to do with provenance, and we'll talk about that more in a further slide. We have three key points for creating a wildflower meadow on an Orcadian island. The first is to use flowers that are found on your island. This is to maintain the plant mix that makes each island different. So what I did from John Crossley was I got a list of all the different species for each of the islands so that people have that to refer to see if their plants will do for their island. It hits me badly because on North Ronaldsay we don't have meadowsweet, and I would love to introduce meadowsweet into our nature reserve there called West Ness, but we're not going to do that because this is part of the distinctive characteristic of North Ronaldsay, that we have fewer species and meadowsweet isn't one of the species. And this feeds into something that's called island biogeography. Working with the plant list that John Crossley gave me, you can see that we've got the 10 Orkney Islands that is part of the NILPS project, the habited islands, and we have the size of the islands in hectares and the number of plant species. And you can see that as the islands get larger, generally we can see that the number of species increases. This is maybe a bit clearer to see on a graph. So here we are on this graph, and you can sort of see that the little small island of Wyre, which is the smallest island, also has the fewest number of plant species. And it gradually, as the islands get larger, the number of species increase. There we go. And up here, where the islands are the largest, they have the most species. And we can create this thing called a trend line showing what the general trend in the data is. Now up here it's sort of interesting. You can sort of see Sanday isn't quite as high as you would expect it to be. And I'm not sure if it's because Sanday maybe doesn't have as many habitats as Rousay has. Or it could be just that Rousay and Westray are especially good and that there's no issue with Sandy. I don't know. It'd be very interesting to get the data for all the Orkney Islands. The next key point is to use seeds or plants that are produced in Orkney. And this refers to this concept of provenance, which is the region where the seed was produced, and which is why on that quiz we had a moment or two ago, that the knapweed with seed produced in Germany would not be suitable. This is because the seeds may have developed traits that help them resist local pests or diseases, or especially in the case of Orkney, extreme weather. The last of the key points is to remember that it's an offence to release species that are not native to the UK into the wild. You'd need a licence from Nature's Scot. So we're going to take a look at some of these problem plants, just so you know why this is a problem. We're going to begin with this beautiful plant. Do you know what it is? It's Himalayan balsam. Now this is an invasive, non-native species. It would have been introduced originally to gardens because it's an absolutely beautiful plant. Now the problem with it is it grows really tall. It can grow to I think 10 feet tall, and because it grows very quickly and is very big, it sort of outcompetes any plant beside it. So that's obviously very damaging because that's muscling out native plants. It's also very good at producing seeds. The seed pod, which is here, is quite something to behold. It's quite a large structure, and what happens is that this pod explodes, and so it broadcasts its seeds all around it very efficiently. This plant is a big problem on waterways because it grows on the banks. It outcompetes all the other plants, all the perennial plants that might be needed. And it's an annual, so it will die back in the autumn. So you end up with the edge of the river banks being just mud because the perennial plants, the plants that would normally be lasting more than 1 year, they're not there anymore. So the river banks have got just a muddy edge on them. So in the winter, when the floods come and the rivers run very high, the banks get eroded really easily because there's no roots holding them together. Again, here we have a beautiful plant. Do you know its name? It's called skunk cabbage. And again, it's the same sort of problem that we had with the Himalayan balsam. It's a non-native invasive species. It's come from America, and there's nothing here to stop it growing. So you see it, I've seen it in Dumfries and Galloway, and it takes over huge areas of wet soils next to rivers. Here we have another beautiful plant, and you can see why it would have been introduced. It's tall and it's graceful, and it has beautiful leaves, and it has beautiful flowers, and it's also not got any insects that will sort of keep it in check, so it stays very fine looking. However, this plant is Japanese knotweed, and it's the same sort of problem as the previous two. It's an invasive non-native species, and what this one does, in addition to sort of muscling out all the native plants, is it has very aggressive root systems and shoot systems, and what they do is they can actually get through quite hard materials such as concrete, so it can be quite a dangerous plant to have near structures such as walls or houses, because it can undermine them. Oh, and here's another plant that you see maybe along the railway systems. I've seen this. It's giant hogweed. It grows really tall. Now, it's a different sort of problem, this one. This one is actually quite a dangerous plant to humans because it has a sap that causes blistering when it's exposed to sunlight, and so it's dangerous for that reason, because it is quite attractive sort of plant that children might want to play with. And here's the last one. Again, another beautiful plant, but this rhododendron is a real pest because it sort of escapes into the hills and onto moorland. And again, the same sort of problem. It grows really well. It will shade out other sorts of plants. If you see rhododendron growing on the moorlands, it has nothing growing underneath it. It can take over an area, and because it's a woody perennial, it is actually quite hard to remove it. So there's some plants we really don't want to introduce into Orkney, and we really don't want to see them in our Northern Isles. I think there might already be Himalayan balsam and Japanese knotweed in Orkney. So having scared everyone about what sort of plants not to grow, what we have a look at is how to go and collect our wildflower seeds from our island. So the first thing we need to look at, is it the correct time of year? Often it's not, so the thing to do is to have an eye on a plant that you'd like to collect the seed from, and keep an eye on that plant and wait until the seeds have set, and you can sort of tell when they're ready because they'll dry and they'll go brown. The other thing you need to look at is where you will collect. Do you have permission to collect? And do not collect from triple SIs. We'll talk about triple SIs on the next slide. So verge is a good place to collect seeds from because they're easily accessible, and verges are often a great place for finding wildflower seeds. You'll need a kit, which is a brown paper bag and envelopes, some containers and a pen. And then we need to make sure you actually know what the plant is, and if it's red, please don't take its seeds. You'll collect the seeds, and it's really important to label them and say where you collected it, and don't take any more than 20% of the seeds that are there. Make sure you leave some for the birds and for next year's plants. And then you'll need to remove all the sort of bits of other plants from around the seeds, and make sure you get rid of any insects. And then you need to either plant the seeds in the autumn or store them in a dry place until spring. Here's a map showing where the sites of special scientific interest are in the North Orkney Islands. This is from a very good website called Magic, and it's got lots of different sorts of information on it. Now it's quite interesting. You can sort of see the areas that have got the triple SIs. Now you get a triple SI for having a particular quality to the site. So these ones here, I suspect, will have been because they'll be great sites for birds. Rouse's got a big area, and that's for the moorland in the middle. Same on Edie. North Ronaldsay hasn't got any triple SIs, and there's a tiny one here on Stronsay, and nothing on Shappensay. But it's important for everyone to know where the triple SIs are on their island so they don't collect seeds from them, and also so that they can appreciate what's there. The last thing we talk about before heading out to collect seeds is managing people's expectations about what the meadow will look like. On the right hand side you can see this lovely beautiful wildflower mix. It's an annual mix, and that was put in at Edinburgh Airport on what would have been a plant, like a flower bed that maybe would just in the past have had pansies and geraniums growing in it. So that's much more interesting to have this, and it certainly was full of insects. Our meadows aren't going to look like that. They're going to be a more subtle thing, and they're also going to change from year to year as different plants sort of take precedence. If it's the right time of year, we then head out to collect seeds. Now this is taken on Rousey, and we're collecting meadow vetchling from the verge. The kit we have is just a brown paper bag and a pencil, because it's really important to label the seeds because it can be hard to recognise them when you're just looking at the seeds. Once we've collected the seeds, we come inside and start separating them from the plant materials. Let's have a look at the different seeds. So starting on the left, we have meadow vetchling. And then the next one we have is yellow rattle. And the last one, which we collected a lot of from John Crossley's garden, is long-headed poppy. It's really useful to have a plate to put the seeds on to stop them rolling everywhere. Then what you do next is you take your envelope and you make sure you label it with the name of the plant, where you got it from, and perhaps even the date, so you can have an idea about how fresh that seed is. What we did at this stage depended upon which venue we were in. When I was in the polytunnel, for example, at Pape, we were able to plant out the seeds because it didn't really matter about soil getting everywhere. So we did that, and that's the picture you see on the left-hand side. For other people, what we did was send the seeds home, and I sent people home with these trays that I got in Orkney at the garden centre in Kirkwall, and some seed compost. Now, a big pack of seed compost costs about £6, and it lasts, that actually goes quite a long way. It's really useful to use seed compost because it won't have the seeds of anything else in it, so that whatever comes up, you can be sure that that's your plant. And it's also useful to have seed, make sure that you label the seed trays as well. I really encourage people to experiment with different ways of propagating their wildflower seeds. This is because there's not been any research paper done on different methods of success on different Orkney islands, so I thought it'd be very interesting for people to try different things and let's see what worked. So I was encouraging people to do some autumn sowing and also some spring sowing. Now what I did was I tried 3 different methods of autumn sowing. On the left hand side of the picture you can see that these plants went in a north facing unheated conservatory. The middle one shows them in my vegetable garden, and the right hand one shows them in the community vegetable garden, polytunnel rather. Disaster struck, and the polytunnel had its plastic ripped off it during the terrible storms we had at Christmas, and on my vegetable garden the neighbours' cows got in and upended a lot of the pots. Some of the pots were okay, but a lot weren't, and so it was mainly the ones in the unheated conservatory that survived. So here are the plants seeds that I tried this year. Other people tried different seeds mixes, and part of the project will be to see how other people got on with theirs. Now I found quite interestingly, what I did was I tried mixing yellow rattle with the meadow foxtail seeds to see if the foxtail, which is a grass, would provide nutrients for the yellow rattle once it got going. It was really interesting because the yellow rattle in the north facing conservatory just only one germinated, whereas the yellow rattle outside, they hadn't been trampled by the cows, it nearly all germinated. And the reason for that is yellow rattle needs a 2-degree exposure to break its germination. The next plants that have done really well have been the long-headed poppies. These were tiny seeds and I couldn't really see what I was doing with them because they were so small. So I planted far too many in the pots, but then thinned them out. They did really well. The red clover is working, as is the knapweed and the angelica. The angelica is a difficult one because we don't have angelica on North Ronaldsay, so I'm going to donate my angelica to a project on another island. Didn't have any success with the northern marsh orchid or the meadow vetchling though. So that we can share our results of our seed planting experiment, I created a Facebook group called Seeds of the Isles, and please feel free to join that if you'd like to see how our experiment is getting on. And here's a couple of posts from that group. Admittedly, it is mostly me doing the posts. The one on the left-hand side shows the experiment I tried with the yellow rattle. So the far left-hand side shows all the little yellow rattle coming up. These are the ones that have been outside. And the little one on the right-hand side just shows how the grass has worked in the conservatory, but the yellow rattle hasn't because it's not had the cold exposure. On the right hand side, I'm showing how I separated out all the millions of long-headed poppy plants I had. We have one more spring, summer and autumn on this project. So what I'm going to do is I still have to do some wildflower sessions on Chappensay and on Sanday, and we've got hopefully we'll be able to do some more seed collecting sessions as well in the late summer. We've also need to plant out all these plug plants on our various nature spots throughout the islands. Here's my contact details. This will work until September of 2024. After that, you can find me on Facebook if you look for Alexandra Wright. Thank you so much for watching this video, and many thanks to our funders and partners as well. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments box or please contact me at work or on Facebook. Last chance for a quiz. What's this plant here? It's the northern yellow cress. This is a nationally scarce plant, but it's found in abundance on the North Isles.